Hi, and welcome to our Q&A number 8. I have a couple good questions for you today. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Question number 1, I would like to know how to get muscles to fire without compensation. So I think this is an awesome question. My right middle trap and left glute have a very hard time, and I'm not sure how to isolate these muscles to make them happen. Single leg deadlifts end up being hamstring quad exercise. Any suggestions for muscle activation in general? So I think this is a great question because you're really trying to figure out what's working and what you feel, which is amazing. So if you end up being all kind of hamstrings and quads, then I check on your glute length ability. So that's telling me when you go into those single leg deadlifts, you're probably either going into an anterior pelvic tilt or you're going into a posterior pelvic tilt. So it's one thing I've learned about the glutes is they love to be nice and stable. And so if the pelvis is kind of moving all around, then you end up putting a little bit more emphasis on that hamstring, which is gonna move that pelvis around versus glute length when you go into that exercise. So for other suggestions, just in general, I like to switch up the exercise entirely. So if you're struggling with something, get a different exercise. So oftentimes we end up with these mental blocks, and if we can just try another exercise, then something might be a switch that works magic. And if I can get something to work where it's almost like the muscle has no choice, then of course that is the best exercise option. All right, make it easier, okay? So I know that seems a little bit silly, but sometimes if I regress it, then I find that point where the person can find the weak muscle that they actually want to work more versus the muscle that always wants to take over. Let's say I'm strong, let me do all the work. And so oftentimes I have to regress it, especially in somebody who's strong or fairly athletic or works out a lot, maybe has a history of training. Oftentimes we have to regress that person way more than they would someone who's never worked out before. And so you might have to regress a lot more than you think. Have someone touch the muscle you want to work. So our brain loves connections, and when you touch a muscle, then you can help it work. So when you're trying to do your single leg work, put your hand on your glutes. See if you can give some feedback to help that link, to help that work come from there by touching that muscle. Use isometrics. So isometrics can be amazing for helping to really seal in and wire those patterns. And so if you can find something and hold it, like maybe say do a hip thrust and hold the top, really feeling those glutes, then having a nice long isometric can really help you tap into that. All right, meditation I think is wonderful as well. So meditation can go a long way for helping us connect with our body, increasing frequency and decreasing intensity. So usually the more intense something is, the less frequently you can do it. So if you kind of decrease that intensity a bit and increase increased frequency helps us wire those pathways to make things fire a little bit easier, a little quicker, without as much effort. And so decreasing that intensity, increasing the frequency can really help with that. All right, so hopefully those ideas will help you. That was a great question. All right, question number 2. Could you go a little more in depth in regards to clunking in the low back SI joint? Could be iliopsoas rubbing over something, question mark, because it's too tight, similar to how the iliopsoas rubs against the iliopectineal bursa and snapping hip syndrome, and hence requires a little stretching. Okay, so I think I know, or at least I've had some experience with the clunking that you're referring to and troubleshooting through that, but in my career, usually a little bit of stretching doesn't fix something, because it's not like you stretch a little bit and then it never comes back, especially if you're dealing with that iliopectineal bursitis. Anyway, there is not a little bit of stretching that usually helps the low back for this. Where I have seen this the most is in my clients that have spondylolisthesis. So basically, one vertebrae kind of moves or slips over the other. Can be completely normal, can be something you're born with, can be something you don't even know you have. So if you haven't had imaging, then you're not going to know you have that. So if you find that it tends to be something that persists or is maybe coupled with pain or nerve pain, muscle pain, then I would absolutely get that checked out. What I generally see that in is things like leg lifts. So they'll tend to get the clunking more like hanging leg lifts, lying on their back leg lifts, and they'll get this clunk in their back. And generally it's due to not enough stabilizers. So the hip flexors are pulling on their spine when they go to lift their legs, and they're getting that shift or pull on the vertebrae because the lateral abdominals aren't doing their job of holding the spine as still as they need to hold it while the psoas pulls. So that shift or that clunk that happens can happen due to instability from not enough stabilization system happening. So definitely not a stretching fix for that, but there is a strengthening fix. So usually with enough cueing and enough awareness of it, I can get the clunking to stop once we get them a little bit stronger and make them aware of the movement pattern that's causing that. Okay, so hopefully that will help give you some more ideas or at least another road for troubleshooting. Question number 3, I have a functional DR, 2 fingers, and it stayed that way. Can control my intra-abdominal pressure enough to hold a plank and even do a pull-up with no doming or signs of intolerance. Awesome, great job. But my TBA does not automatically fire. I have to consciously make it fire. When I cough, my intercostal muscles are dominant and my obliques fire, and my stomach pushes out instead of going in and having my TBA fire. I have been to a physical therapist, done 2 ab rehab courses focused on diaphragmatic breathing and core strength exercises, been to an osteopath and had manual therapy, and have been diligent about working on this for 2 years. After having an adjustment from the osteopath, my core fired automatically for a while, much more easily, but after a while it falls back into the old pattern. Do you have any thoughts on what else I could do to help my TBA fire on its own? Okay, lots of detail. Great detail there. So from what it sounds like, granted I've never seen you, so I'm completely guessing, but if you will take my guess, it sounds like it is not a women's health problem. It sounds like it's orthopedic. All right, so I find that the core and pelvic floor can be very reflexive to the interaction above and below the system. Okay, so how the pelvis is kind of centered, how the rib cage is centered, and what's going on with that interaction either makes the core fire more naturally or makes you have to think about it. Now, great job on getting it to fire with work. I see this with the pelvic floor as well, where people will have that reverse pattern with their pelvic floor, where their cough or sneeze and their pelvic floor push out versus going in. And it seems like you're seeing that exact pattern with your abdominal wall where it bulges out instead of coming in. And so as you can see, that's more of a reverse breathing pattern. Now, I've seen 2 things, at least I've seen more than 2 things, but 2 things that I think really glaringly stand out as something that you could automatically do to help that. Thing number 1 is over bracing. So I find people who tend to slip back into those reverse breathing patterns where it doesn't hold and it's not automatic tend to be reverse breathers, and they tend to hold too much tension in their abdominal wall. So my guess is that during the day, you are holding your abs in more than you think you're holding in. So I would try to relax those. I would try to relax your belly just a little bit more than maybe you feel comfortable right now to allow that breath to go down. And so what's probably happening is you're probably holding your abs too tight. So then your breath is going up. When your breath goes up for your inhale, it's going to go down and out for your exhale. Okay, so you've got to set yourself up for that really good inhale to get that good natural pattern exhale to follow. The other thing that I find helps with this, and the fact that you said that after your osteopathic adjustment, you had a more automatic pattern for a while. So that's telling me, okay, I am thinking that you've got an alignment issue going on. Maybe your rib cage is a little bit twisted, like one side is flared, or maybe your pelvis is kind of sitting a little bit twisted out. Now, what moves bones? What moves our pelvis? What moves our rib cage? Muscles, right? Muscles move bones. Bones just don't move themselves. You have a skeleton and you sit it up in the corner of a wall, it's going to sit there. All right, muscles move bones. Okay, so which is often why you get an adjustment. Things feel great, but they don't hold because you haven't changed how your muscle firing pattern. You haven't changed that natural pattern that you have. I love the Postural Restoration Institute for establishing more automatic patterns within a kind of, I don't want to say twisted system, but essentially what you're describing where you need that adjustment because things aren't in alignment. I find their exercises work really well. I've incorporated a lot into my programs working with women because I love the automatic responses that they develop because they put you in positions where your abs have to automatically work instead of having to consciously create TBA tension. Okay, so they focus more on the automatic responses for things versus not automatic. And so sometimes in the rehab world, we need things to be purposeful, very purposeful, like creating tension, learning how to contract our abs, learning how to contract our pelvic floor. But then once we move past that and we're trying to incorporate it into life, we need things to be a lot more automatic, where our alignment is happening because of how we fill our water at the sink and versus how we stand, where we can maintain that alignment so that after something like an adjustment, we don't slip right back into our old patterns. Okay, so I would check out that for helping those patterns hold. So hopefully that's helpful for giving you some ideas. Okay, question number 4. After my first delivery, I tend to prolapse, especially in stressful times. Whew, stress is hard in prolapse. All right, my pelvic floor is extremely tight for years, even before childbirth, heavy workouts, overworking abdominal muscles, tight psoas, TFL, the whole stuff. And I stopped breathing while focusing. Yeah, that's a tough one. No leaking. Do you recommend biofeedback besides meditation as an assist for learning how to let muscles go, or maybe a pessary cube for helping with prolapse additional to breathing and other helpful exercises? No kegels. Great. I'm glad you're not doing kegels, because if you have that history of tightness, that's probably just going to set you off a little bit more. Okay, so my question for you is do you have control? Meaning, can you connect with your pelvic floor and relax it? And can you connect with your pelvic floor and contract it? If you can't, then biofeedback would be amazing, and you should absolutely get biofeedback. If you feel like, no, Sarah, I can connect really well. I can connect to my pelvic floor and let it go when I'm thinking about it. But my problem is more when I'm not thinking about it. Then I don't know how much biofeedback is actually going to help you with that, because when you're getting the biofeedback, you're thinking about it, other than the fact that you're just setting aside more time in your day for thinking about it. And the more time we set aside for thinking about something, the more that becomes just part of our life, and the more that spills over into our automatic patterns. So I kind of think I'm on the fence there, whether or not it's going to help you. That depends on how much you need to retrain. Now, if you're really having trouble with letting go of your pelvic floor, then biofeedback, even when you're consciously thinking about it, then biofeedback can definitely help with that. So I think that would be a really good way to go. You need to back off your workouts to the point where you can actually focus on your breathing during your workouts. If the weight is so heavy that there isn't space in your brain to think breathe, then it's probably too heavy. Like you're leaving parts of your body behind that aren't in the right mental space for being able to lift that weight. And trust me, we all go through it, and that is an ego check. It was a huge ego check for me, having to hold myself back with sports, especially climbing. I could go and climb something really hard, but I couldn't climb something really hard and breathe well. I couldn't climb something really hard and maintain good alignment for my pelvic floor without bearing down. So I had to back way off of climbing and climb stuff that was really easy. And ego is tough, because I had to put my ego in check, because, you know, I wanted to be able to show off my ability to climb, but then I had to climb stupid easy routes because my pelvic floor and my breathing system was not to where my finger and shoulder strength was, if that makes sense. So my question back to you is why do you feel the need to lift such heavy weight where you can't focus on breathing while you're doing it? And that would be what I would probably unpack a little bit more, because it is an unpacking system. So you work on it at a level where you can focus on your breathing for a while until you get it. And then you make it harder, you make it heavier, you go harder. I can climb whatever I want now, as hard as I want. And my patterns have been remolded, I guess you could say, because I did the work and worked on it. So you probably just need to back off to the point where you can actually focus on your breathing and pelvic floor and retrain that system, so that you're not slipping into that shallow breathing pattern, so you're not over gripping, so you're not breath holding, and then retrain those patterns, and then you can go back to lifting as heavy as you want once you get the patterns retrained. So some of that is hard because you have to back off a little bit more than you necessarily want. I do sometimes recommend a pessary. In women with tightness, sometimes the pessary makes them feel safe, so they can relax against it. They can let go, and that is very helpful. Other times it perpetuates their tightness and makes them worse. So the only thing I can say there is give it a try, see if it's right for you. If it's not, recognize that. If it makes your tightness worse, if it affects your kind of sensory feedback system where it kind of heightens all of that because there's something there, then just recognize that and know it's maybe not a good fit for you, but it might be a good fit, and that's a case-by-case basis for me. Okay, so hopefully that helped give you some ideas, but yeah, I'm with you on the ego check when it comes to rehabbing our bodies. It pretty much sucks, but we need to do it, and then once you do it, you get through it, you're gonna go. You're on the other side. All right, so good luck for that, and hopefully those were some helpful ideas.